Somebody viewed me so I can be on my laptop. Happy, my grandpa that came over from Lithuania. If he was alive, he'd be 134 today. I can never forget. He was born in 1888. Okay, so let me see if I can put a chat, but I don't know that anybody's ever chatted, except maybe my nephew in California. Okay, so the topic was pseudo acceptance, a common blind spot, and Marci's story. And Marci's, oh my gosh, Marci's story is 3 pages. Let me see how far I get, because I like the example stories because some of them are close to your experience and it might make you feel I'm not the only one, and that might be a good feeling. Helplessness doesn't happen in isolation. In fact, there's often a reoccurrence sequence of emotions that takes you into the experience of helplessness and then into depression. At first, you become frustrated and angry that you can't influence the situation, but fueled by your anger, you keep trying. And if you're really motivated, you may even press on well past the point where you see that your efforts aren't being successful. Once the anger peters out, you're likely to give up and lapse into the experience of helplessness. And if you combine your experience of helplessness with the perception that getting cured of bipolar disorder will never happen, then you've got the recipe for clinical depression. So when they say clinical depression, that isn't just like I got a divorce, I lost my job, that depression. Once they say clinical depression, you have something, okay? Major depressive disorder, MDD, bipolar disorder, which has depression as one of its ups and downs. So when they can say, or when you hear clinical depression, that's it. That's a lifetime mental illness. Why is McAfee getting on my page? Go away, McAfee. Okay. Anger and helplessness at bipolar disorder are 2 sides of the same coin. They're experiences that will visit frequently, especially at the start of your bipolar journey. As much as you might like to skip over this part of the journey, it's pretty much inevitable. You have a choice. You can desperately hold on to your denial in order to hold your bipolar reality at bay, or you can do your best to face the feelings of anger and helplessness that you're inevitably going to encounter if you're bipolar. One strong advice is that you focus most of your energies on the latter, meaning if you accept that you're bipolar and start working towards stability with either meds or talk therapy, psychiatrist, then a counselor. Psychiatrists, if they're only checking your meds, might not want to see you that often. The counselor's going to start with every week and whittle it down till it's like once a month. That's the usual. That's why I'm saying that. Pseudo acceptance, a common blind spot. You may have been one of those people who always tries to do the right thing. It's how you've been raised. It's how you lived your life. If that fits, then you may find that you don't connect at all with a desire to reject your diagnosis. You get help. You take your meds, and you seem to adjust well. You seem to have accepted the reality of bipolar disorder, but possibly you have only masked or denied your deeper, more complex feelings about the illness. I think I know where this is going. I think it was Ashley's story. I think it's the same book, so I can check. Fetterman and Thompson, MD. Fetterman, PhD, and Thompson, Jr., MD. Okay, let's see how Marci manages. Marci came from a family where mood disorders were not uncommon. Her maternal grandfather was very emotionally unstable, though he was never diagnosed or treated. Her mother had been diagnosed with manic depression in her mid-20s, and Marci's childhood memories were colored by her mother's intense emotionality, interrupted by periods of time when she was in the hospital. Marcy's older brother had a stormy adolescence that transitioned into a predominant depression from his later teens. He had been treated with several different antidepressants, and his physician finally found one that seemed to be effective. But generally speaking, he did not live a happy life. Marcy's father had left the family when she was about 6. He wasn't prepared to deal with his wife's problems, not nor was he ready to be both mother and father to his 2 children. It's no surprise that Marcy had always lived with fears of becoming bipolar, that every small dip or elevation in her mood seemed a threat of something bigger. Marcy's experienced her first full-blown mania episode during her junior year of college. Her symptoms were classic, though she also experienced delusions in which she was convinced that she had some rare, undiagnosable disease. She was hospitalized and placed on a mood stabilizer as well as an antipsychotic medication. The latter was prescribed to clear up the delusions. We made a difference between hallucinations and delusions. I should bring that up again. I think hallucinations are actually you seeing other people, and delusions are just thinking something that isn't true. I think I have that right, but I'll check it. Um, Marcy's symptoms resolved after about 6 days of hospitalization, and she was again feeling like her old self. Despite some mild side effects from the medicine, her mania and subsequent hospitalization were actually a relief, as she no longer walking on eggshells waiting for trouble. Marcy had been a biology major, and before her hospitalization, she had her heart set on becoming a physical therapist. In fact, she had already selected 4 different master's programs in physical therapy where she was going to apply during the next semester. So, this much I know, physical therapy takes a bachelor's and another year specifically on physical therapy and maybe like working with a program. I happen to know because I've had a lot of physical therapy in my days, and I know that they need 5 years to be a doctor of physical therapy, and they just need 4 and 1 to have a master's in physical therapy. But I think they get more money if they get a doctorate in physical therapy. My Coke's getting hot. Hot Coke is not the best. Okay, where am I? During the summer, after her year, Marcy made a significant shift in her long-range career plans. She decided that she wanted to learn more about psychiatric conditions and dedicate her life to working with others who struggle with psychiatric disorders. She identified several programs she could obtain a nursing degree while also progressing toward a master's in psychiatric nursing. The plan felt exciting to her and provided a meaningful direction. She was sure that her own life experience would help her be effective as a psychiatric professional. So remember the textbook that I used for Colas, and now I forget the other person, but that's one of the textbooks, an updated version of that Marcy would need to be a psychiatric nurse. Marcy did everything by the book. She was very conscientious about sleep. She never missed her medication. She tolerated the side effects of her drugs by simply telling herself they were a necessary consequence of treatment. She was open about her bipolar disorder and readily informed any love interest about her condition. Sadly, Marcy's efforts at finding a love relationship didn't pan out. While she had several friends, her deep yearning for a strong, stable, and lasting intimate relationship remained unfulfilled. Marcy had little difficulty being accepted to the school of her choice, and in her first 2 years of coursework, they went quite well. It was also noteworthy that she had remained very stable since the onset of her disorder. During Marcy's first set of clinical rotation, she found she was having racing thoughts with increasing irritability. It was especially noticeable when she was at a nursing facility with elderly patients. Quite uncharacteristically, Marcy ramblings of her patients with dementia. She knew something wasn't right, so she scheduled a session with her psychiatrist, who increased her dose of the current medication. Unfortunately, the stronger dose didn't adequately apply the brakes, and one day Marcy exploded at a frail 83-year-old woman who was related to her as if she were the woman's own daughter. Marcy's blowup was clearly inappropriate, but her real problem was that the explosions continued and wound up back in the hospital for a second time. She kept trying to tell herself that she was only experiencing a brief period of instability, but her rational defense didn't work against her intense emotional outbursts. This is sad. I don't know whether it's going to end sad. Let me tell you what I do, but it would make a difference if the people in this career would help her out. She's having impatience with older people with dementia, and in nursing homes. She could probably get a position where it was a mental health unit, but it wasn't so much memory. Like hospitals can have a mental health unit, and some of them can have like a dementia unit that's locked up so people don't wander and stuff like that. So it could be, I don't know if this is where it's going to go, but my hope for Marcy is that it goes this way. If she gets help from the people in her career and they realize that the irritability came from just working with those demented, very older people who have a tendency to ramble about stuff. And the one patient that associated her as a daughter, that could be good if you're not mentally ill, but it might have made it worse for Marcy, for this woman to think she was her daughter or something. And then when she came out with the outbursts of being impatient, that probably freaked that woman out. So let's see if this ends happy. I read most of this, but I don't think I read the ending. All right, I'm going to read this again because I looked up too much. Unfortunately, the stronger dose did not adequately apply the brakes, and one day Marcy exploded at, this is what I read, a frail 83-year-old woman who was relating to her as if she were the woman's own daughter. Marcy's blow-up was clearly inappropriate, but the real problem was that the explosions continued and she wound up back in the hospital for a second time. She kept trying to tell herself that she was only experiencing a brief period of instability, but her rational defense didn't work against her intense emotional outbursts. This hospitalization was very different from the first one. Her psychiatrist tried some different medications that seemed to help with her manic episodes, but once her mania was under control, she spiraled downward into an agitated depression. Rather than a set of classic manic symptoms being affected by psychotic distortion, her emotions seemed much more connected to her core issues. She was angry with the hospital staff because she thought they weren't sensitive to her needs. She was angry at her mother's bipolar disorder for robbing her of a normal childhood. She felt hopeless about the prospects of ever being normal, and she felt both anger and despair over not being able to change any of it. This wasn't just agitated depression, it was a whole lifetime of unresolved conflicts and unfulfilled needs. Marcy was discharged after about a week, but her intense emotions didn't quickly resolve with new medications. Instead, it took months of twice weekly psychotherapy before she was able to understand that the needs she tried to rise above throughout childhood and adolescence had finally crashed through the defenses she had built were now demanding her attention. There's probably not more of Marci's story, but more of the authors going in. But I'll just read the paragraph that comes after Marci's story. And this is them talking about Marci. So, Fetterman Thompson. Part of what Marci had to come to terms with was that being bipolar wasn't easy. It wasn't just a matter of superficially accepting the diagnosis and moving on with her life. Through therapy, she had to uncover the painful reality of what it meant to be bipolar and to grow up with a mother who was anything but stable. I think I have time to read another paragraph because that leaves me still sad. Marci had to recognize that she had learned to take care of her mother at a very early age, and in doing so had to prematurely give up any hope of having her own needs fulfilled by a loving, emotionally present mother. Instead, she learned to become her own parent, and as a result, she readily moved toward a profession where taking care of others was central to the work. Throughout much of her life, Marci had been trying to make up for the unmet needs of the little girl with the bipolar mother. Once this recognition collided with her own bipolar reality, the accompanying psychotherapy became as important, as powerful as some of the cutting edge medications that had been prescribed for her. There's more about her story. I still have hope for her, the ending of her story. And after that, after the more we talk about Marci's story, there's a checklist or a helping you to write your own story, or, come to the specifics about your story. Like bipolar kind of affected her before she was bipolar. She had to help a mother who was called manic depressive back then, but bipolar. So she had to be the adult. So she was fighting a past that maybe she didn't explain, like they either didn't ask the questions or she didn't go back and explain back then. But with more of the talk therapy, it came out. So the talk therapy plus the medications that they may have to juggle, and it doesn't mean they juggle them once. It's a lifetime of an illness. There might be times when they might have to juggle it again. So happy to be here on my laptop. Have a nice Wednesday night. Tomorrow is the 19th, the day before spring, and Friday, the 20th, is spring. But today, it still feels like winter. So I can't wait for spring, and I bet you feel the same. Have a good night. See you later.